Welcome to the Solemn Vanguard channel. Today we are doing my Great Nature deck profile. This is the deck that I will be piloting at the World Championship of Vanguard in Premium. Now currently we're actually before Worlds, and by the time I upload this will be after Worlds. Now why Great Nature? I really don't want to play Nlk because Nlk has been solved. There is no way to innovate beyond that as far as I can tell. And so you are looking at a bunch of mirror matches on the day itself, which will go into time, where you will be passing turn and where everything will be reliant on who hits their Bobos first. I also don't want to bring Ezel because Ezel is a sacky shit deck. Now, Ezel could win Worlds, it really could, because if you consistently go first and get Bowmains, you auto win. There is no special playing around that you can do to stop that BS. If someone just gets lucky all day, they could win with Ezel, but if you get unlucky, you just automatically lose and there's no amount of skill that can make up for that. So I don't want to bring Ezel, it's a sacky stupid deck. And this deck is just nuts. It wins against Ezel, even against a high rolling Ezel very often. Now if they're high rolling beyond belief, okay, I die. There is no deck on this planet that can reliably beat Ezel that way anyway. It beats Nlk, generally humiliates the shit out of them. Right now, when I go up against Nlk, I don't know, I just win like 90%, 95% of my games. That's how good this deck is against that. Of course, I can brick. I can lose because of bricking, just like any other deck can. But overall, great matchup for Nlk. And then some rogue matchups, I also win. So this deck is just really fucking nuts. However, again, we're before Worlds right now. I can't tell you how well I did. Maybe I brick beyond belief and that's that. However, let's get into the profile for Leopald. Again, hoping to get those SVRs by Worlds. Reason for it is it creates an Excel circle, but more importantly, its skill is an amazing on-ride. Now, I know what you're gonna say. Sometimes you will get its second skill and then it gets a crit and power, but you stride over it and you lose the skill. So then it's basically vanilla, and that's true. However, little over 2/3 of your deck are normal units, meaning it's much more likely that you do see normal units and thus you get its skill off, which is absolutely busted. It's basically a +2 to field. You get to dig through some units, hopefully get something really good, especially in the Nlk matchup. There's a few things you can do. You try to get your Honolly, you try to get your Monocular Tiger to go for the Zoa combo. I will explain that later. And against the normal matchup, you're kind of hoping for those Crayon Tigers, maybe some Ocelots. Again, Monocular Tiger is just as good in those regular matchups as well. And you're also thinning the deck. So because of this card and Mika Subaru, you're actually thinning your deck quite a bit for normal units, meaning you keep a lot of triggers in deck and you generally check into a bit more than your average deck that doesn't actually thin. So overall, great card, and it also gives you access to one more tech in the G zone, which everyone has forgotten about, but it's actually a nutty card in the Nlk matchup, but more on that later. Then we have 4 Rhino. Rhino is basically the best card in the deck. Now some people think this is because of your Zoa combo. If you don't know, maybe I should tell you right now. Basically, when you use Zoa and you give the skill to Rhino and you boost it with a Monocular Tiger, no matter what you mill, your opponent is barely able to guard it. Either you cannot call Zeros or Sentinels, or you can't call anything but G-Guardians. So the only way for your opponent to guard this is to have 4 heals in hand or something insane like that, and even then it's pretty tough for some clans. However, that is not the main reason why this card is so amazing. This Zoa combo is actually only really used in the Nlk matchup. Now obviously, if you have the chance to do the combo against another matchup, you'll go for it, except for Ange and Spikes, who have gigantic G-guards that they can get to very easily. But in other matchups, like if you can go for it, cool. Also, don't do it against Ezel because they can actually use Solemn into draw PG and then get a free guard. So that you don't want to waste a game on that one. So, but every other matchup, whoa, apart from those, you basically do use the combo if you have it. But if you don't have it, doesn't matter. The card is still insane. Why? Standard has power creep, the power of Great Zeros. So most of your guard right now is in your Great Zeros. You have all these decks running the new triggers, the 15k, that spicy 15k shield, but they're not always using the bigger Grade 1s for the simple reason that the old Grade 1s often still have better skills. So a deck like Nlk will be running the Yellow Bolt, the Dimension Creeper, the Serpent Charmer, cards that don't have the 10k shield but instead the 5k. Grade 2s weren't creeped, they're still at 5k. So the large majority of your guard is actually in your Grade Zeros, and he turns these off. Everyone is going into draw PGs instead of regular PGs, and he, again, turns these off. So Rhino is essentially negating like half the deck's guard already. And because of Excel circles, you actually can place 2 Crayon Tigers together with Rhino. And again, because of Excel circles, Rhino now hits success way more easily than he used to. So because of the reboot, Rhino became much stronger than he used to be. So even against decks where your main game plan isn't the Zoa combo, you still use him as the most powerful fucking Silent Tom this game has ever seen. Also, the more Rhino you run, the more likely it is you can actually cheese a Zoa combo out of nowhere because you can draw into all your pieces. So overall, very good reason to run 4. I won't be running less. 4, Crayon Tiger. The best unit Great Nature has ever had. Together with Rhino, it's nuts. Even if you put a draw trigger on your Excel circle and then make that unit even bigger because of Bolero, Crayon Tiger still makes that unit swing twice. Just so much value in one card, and then it refunds you the cost of retiring that rearguard in the first place. Just a great card. You should be running 4 in every single Great Nature deck. There's no excuse. I don't get why this card is currently only $5. We'll see if that goes up sometimes, but you need 4. Then we have 3, Ocelot. I used to run 4, but then I started making some changes for the NLK matchup, so I'm forced into 3. You run these because you want to turn on your Mika Subaru as soon as possible. Now, we do run, I'll quickly go over that as well, the starter Telescope Rabbit, who also turns on Mika Subaru, so you can fetch your proper grade 3 rides. But you really don't want to be wasting Counterblast on that, because Counterblast is actually a big issue the deck has. So we run the Ocelot, we hope to ride into it. He's good for rushing because you can call down something like a Slip Pangolin, which is an extra draw trigger we're running, spoiler alert. So that turns then into a 9k, you have 2 9ks, or you can do it on the Telescope Rabbit, but then you can also use your Mika Subaru. So overall, we want to ride him, but if we don't, it's no big deal. We simply don't have the room. This deck is packed so damn tight because of certain cards that we'll get to later. Then we're running 2 Bobo. In case we're being damage denied too much and we want to go for the Zoa combo, Bobo is always there. Even if you had to ride it, this already tells your opponent, hey, I'm running Bobo, and they'll assume you're running more. So then they will stop damage denying you very often because they know the Bobo's coming, even though we're only running 2. So even when you only ride him, you're already getting use out of him. But then also, sometimes your opponent will try to attack you, give you 1 damage. So you strode before, you all Mirage him out, because we actually have a G-Guard that calls in your opponent's turn. Then give yourself the damage, and next turn you can go for the Zoa and win. So that's a pretty neat little trick right there. Overall, just sets you up in case you're being damage denied by a very smart NLK player. Next up, 4 Monocular Tiger, the card we want to be seeing ASAP together with a Rhino and an extra Leopard to go into our auto-win Zoa, at least against the NLK matchup. But this deck is really built for the NLK matchup. I'm assuming I'll see a lot of them at Worlds, and so I still run enough cards that can beat other matchups, the Crayons, the Rhinos, all that good stuff together with the Excel circles, the Boleros. Like, all of that is taken care of to a point where I can still beat normal matchups, but all the other cards are anti-NLK, so I can completely destroy those as well. Now again, could be that I just brick beyond belief and I don't destroy them, but from playtesting like 95% win rate, something insane like that. So 4, we want to be drawing into these. It's also 10k shield in the Ezels matchup, so that's pretty dope, but that's really not what we're super concerned with. 4, Mika Subaru. This card is so amazing. It's basically the best card Great Nature got back in the day. Like, Great Nature was fucking ass. And then we got the Fighters Collection introducing this card together with Cat Paloog, I believe, and immediately the deck was just good. Chat Noir, Cat Paloog, this card. This card is so nuts. It searches your grade 3s. So it gives you your correct ride if you see it early, meaning instead of 4 cards you want to see early to get your correct ride, being the correct ride itself, now you have 8 because you have the mic or the correct ride itself to get into your correct ride, and that's huge. But apart from ride fixing, it also gives you pieces. So on your first ride, when you go into Bolero, your Mika Subaru can be called down, and then at the end of the turn, you already know I'm getting back my Leopards, I'm getting back my Rhinos, I'm getting back anything I need to the next turn either push hard with Rhino or do my Zoa turn when we're talking about NLK. So overall, this card is just the ultimate fetcher because you're fetching the best cards in the deck apart from Crayon. If this card could fetch Crayon as well, oof. Insanity. So 4 off, definitely never go lower. This card is nuts. Next up, 4 Honolly. This card is your anti-NLK card. Now, in the past, I have said that Honolly doesn't do much against NLK. And that is true to an extent. Essentially, when you call Honolly, and your opponent has like 5 damage, they're still swinging 6 times with a gigantic Nlk with an extra crit. You are gonna die, even when you stop the assassins. But if your deck is built to fuck with Nlk, this gives you that push to truly do that. So we run 4 because we want to see this card before striding. We want to make sure that we get to this card as fast as possible. Now, if we're playing against someone with a really bad Nlk build, then they're so slow that we'll definitely get to it anyway. But if we're playing against the optimized build, you know, the Kevin Cho meets Maxim Solemn, Derek Dow, that kind of build with the yellow bolts and the tragic claws and dimension creepers, basically that faster build, we need to see this ASAP. We can't afford to go, oh, I'll run 2 so I get it in the matchup. Like, no, we run 4 because we need to fucking see it ASAP, because we need to survive. So we get this card, which already handicaps their turn a little, but if we were running a regular deck, we would be dying anyway, by the way. And then some of the other choices will make it so we survive easily, because we haven't been giving them damage. This deck isn't required to deal them 6 damage to win. We only need to deal them 1, the Zoa one. So what we do is we bait them into looping. We give them the 2 or the 3 damage, just enough that they think, you know what? I could win right now, because against any other deck, and even a regular Great Nature deck, that would be true. But then, once they get into looping, they will quickly realize that this was all for nothing. Unless, of course, you brick. So the 4 Honolly, we need to see it. Also, it's a great ride target, because the strategy usually is to not swing on grade 1 and only swing at grade 2. So the only damage you give them is the 1 from the grade 2 and the 1 from your stride turn that gives them 2 damage to loop, maybe Bobo to go to 3 or even 4, but generally you give them the 2 damage. But since they're running creepers and other 8Ks, so 7Ks and 8Ks, 6 swings under them. So if we can ride a 6K, that's already giving us 1 more drive check, which is 1 more drive check to find combo pieces. Even as a 6K, it's actually a very useful ride target. And then, of course, as a rear guard, it's great already. Apart from that, against Ezel, it's good. Now, Ezel usually doesn't go over the 4 attacks. Like, usually they have the 1 Excel circle. Now, if they get really lucky with insane Wonder Ezel plays or something, it's good. And against Glorious Reigning Dragon, it cucks them as well. But what makes it so good against Ezel is riding it. Now, this feels pretty counterproductive because you have a lower body, but that doesn't matter because none of their units actually create magic numbers at 6K because they run Howls, Dindrains, and Garifts, and then they're grade 2. So everything is going to be something like 17, and 6 is never the breaking point. But what you can do is by riding the 6K, you can deny them damage. They will be rushing you without a single counterblast, meaning their Vivians and their Garifts don't go off. So even when they high roll a little bit less. So this is an awesome ride target against the Ezel matchup. If you have 2 in hand, even better. You ride this, you call 1, and now you're basically even more safe than before. So overall, many reasons to see this. And then if you see this in other matchups, then you just throw it away with Spangled, which is the best G-Guard in the game. Next up, 1 Stride Fodder. Now, I wish I could run more. Again, there's no room. This used to be an other Bobo, but I noticed that my amount of grade 1s was running really low. Now, if you've been counting, you probably noticed that I'm missing some more cards, and let's get into that, you know. Now, the reason we're running this 1 Stride Fodder is because we don't want to ditch the Leopold, we don't want to ditch the Rhino. So if we happen to see it, cool, we use it to stride. I wish I could run more, but I can't, because we're running 3 cards that don't have grade 1 or 2. We're running 3 Bikun, otherwise known as the Nlk Cutter. This card is why Honolly cucks Nlk. It's basically a PG when your opponent's Vanguard has attacked twice or more, but for free. So you're not required to discard anything. You just guard with this and say, okay, your attack stops. So your opponent's Nlk, who swings at you like 3 more times, but you have 3 of this in hand, Bikun, Bikun, Bikun. You would normally lose at least 6 cards, even if you had draw PGs, but because of this cunt, you don't have to. This basically makes it so that against Nlk, we are running 7 perfect guards instead of 4. And together with our G guards and our Honolis, we are basically so sure we can survive almost any loop that then afterwards, after we baited them into looping us to give us enough damage to then Zoa them out of the game. Now, what they can do is they can ride Sullivan, and if they saved their Bat Malat, they can ride Sullivan, and that way they could survive. So what you then do is, since you have Excel circles, you try to make as many as possible. You try to swing without hitting, but still forcing them to Soul Blast out. So you will swing with like a 5k, and they will have to Soul Blast. You will swing with your Vanguard, sadly that will hit. The cards on the Excel circle will also hit unless they put defensive triggers on their Vanguard. They will probably have something like, oh, a 10k on their Vanguard, so they're 21, but then you swing with your Excel circles with no extra power against 19, 19, and they're forced to Soul Blast 4 after those 2 extra attacks. And so this way you're able to wither down their soul to a point where Sullivan no longer gives them defensive power, so the Rhino play is deadly again. Now, if they saved their Bat Malat for that very specific moment, you are still fucked. However, what you do is you bait out the Bat Malat. On your first try turn, you swing by your Vanguard, which would be a 27 unboosted. So what they would then do, if you swing 27 unboosted and they Bat Malat, you would no longer hit, because they would go 12 plus 20, they would become 32. So you would try to put your trigger power on a rear guard to not give them damage. And they know that you will damage deny them, so they won't Bat Malat at that point because they want that damage. However, you do the reverse. You do boost, and they think, haha, so I can Bat Malat to be on GB, to get some extra soul, and he still hits. Ha! He's doing a dumb move. He's boosting. I'm gonna do my Bat Malat right now. But actually, you are playing 4D chess. You're even further ahead. You did that because you wanted them to Bat Malat. Because 2 turns from now, that missing Bat Malat will make it so they lose the game. So you try to make sure that they can't end their loop on Sullivan and can't Bat Malat, because then you can empty their soul, still do the Rhino, and they won't get the defensive power from the Sullivan. But yeah, that was being sidetracked. That's basically, this is what 400 games do to you, or 200 or 300. You know, I have the Excel sheet, but an insane amounts of games does to you. You know every interaction by heart. So this card makes it so you easily survive any loop whatsoever, get the Zoa, and then you just auto win unless they have 4 heals, which they could, but it's very, very rare. And there's also plenty of games where you just Zoa them before they can loop. So that's why we run the 3 Bikun. I'd love to run more, but again, there is a lack of room. Getting into the triggers, we run 4 Draw PG. Again, we need to run draws because we need to find all our pieces, and also PGing is awesome. Why wouldn't you run 4 draw PGs? What's much more special is that we also run 4 Slip Pangolin. Another draw. Yes, we run 8 draws in a deck that's prone to decking out. This seems very scary, and it sure is, but if you can manage it right, you will get your pieces much more easily and thus win the game more easily. Also, getting defensive draw triggers then makes your hand even bigger, makes it more likely you see your Monoculars and your Rhino to just destroy them and get everything. And also, why you run draws is the G-Guard Spangled. Now, we will get to that, but Spangled basically makes it so every draw trigger is just a gift from God himself. Our Lord and Savior Duckbill, of course. So 8 draws, very important. Now you could be asking, hey, you use a lot of soul. Why don't you run Castagnette Donkey, the soul charge draw? We basically want the 10k defensive power. Against Ezel, checking a V trigger often cucks their turn. Checking 2 completely shuts them down. So any 5k trigger that you use is just suicide against Ezel, so we had to maximize. I wish Ezel wasn't a thing. Also, Bushiroad, please ban Bowmain. It's a stupid fucking deck. It's not good, like it just sacks. Good players aren't rewarded with Ezel, so really just ban Bowmains so you no longer have a sacky stupid deck. Now we have 4 crits. Obviously crits are just still great. In a regular matchup we need it, and it's also big shield. I used to run 6/6, but this is just way more stable. If Nlk is out of the meta, of course we'll bump up amount of crits again, because then it makes sense again. We really, against Nlk, seeing a crit is just so dumb and painful because you're putting it on a rear guard because you don't want to give them damage. And then 4 of our goat boy. I wish I could run the CCSC heal. This deck has a real resource problem, so it's very, very hard to pilot. But we're forced to run this again because of Ezel. Once Ezel is out of the meta, they won't get banned because they're so fucking new. They should be. Once they're out of the meta, we go back to the resource heals. We need to fix the resource problems, but for now we run the V triggers. I already discussed my starter, but it's Telescope Rabbit. I already told you. He just turns on Mika Subaru early, which then allows you to fetch your correct grade 3, even when you don't ride the Ocelot. Apart from that, you then also have a rear guard, meaning if you try to swing for 6 and you hit a trigger, you can put it on the rabbit, so you're not forced to give your opponent damage when you don't want to. Now, if you have everything in hand you need, you're playing against something like Geese, what you can also do is use Ocelot to give him power, and then you have 2 swinging 9Ks. He will disappear, so Geese will be forced to give you damage, and you still got some rush in. Just a few lines of play you can really do. Very versatile card. I wish we could play the V starter, because then it's +1 soul. Again, resources are important, and also just your consistency goes up, but we really need the versatility of this card for every single matchup, basically, especially NLK, really. Now, getting into the G zone, where a lot of things will get clearer. We start with 3 Bolero, basically the best card in the G zone, probably the best stride. This card ramps up so quickly, gives +4k to your entire front row, no matter how many Excel circles you have. So you just pump something so fucking much, and then for every G zone face up card, meaning if you start using the G guard that flips, you start getting so much damn power. Very often when you start losing the good rear guards, you will literally call your slip Pangolins, like those dumb draw triggers, on an Excel circle, and Bolero will make it a disgusting 38k swinging beat stick of death. So Bolero, great card, costs a soul, so really have to watch out with what you do with your soul, but the best finisher in the game. We run 3. Usually you won't need more than 2, but the Turd is pretty important in certain matchups. 1 Ferniges. You only really use this against NLK if your opponent is a slower NLK player and you don't have a Honolly, and you for some reason got to second stride. I don't know what the fuck that NLK player is doing, but hey, it happens. This card will refund all your resources and will draw you a whole fucking new hand, because you will put down worthless draw triggers, you will use your Mika Subarus, you will just call a bunch of stuff, draw a bunch of cards, get all your resources back, but you're very prone to decking out. So this is a very skill-based card. Using this could lose you the match as well. So, because if you have like 5 rear guards, you will draw 5, but you will also soul charge 5. It's not optional, meaning you'd lose 10 cards of your deck. So really watch out with this card. But if you're able to use it for some reason, it's very handy. You have those, either the dead Telescope Rabbit that's still on your field for some reason, the Mika Subaru, the draw triggers, maybe give you the cards you need to survive that upcoming NLK turn. So you need the 1 definitely. I used to run 2 because at first the plan against NLK was basically to pass turn, and then endlessly go into this to turn your whole hand into Bobo's heal, Rhino, Monocular, Leopard, and then just do the Zoa out of nowhere while you kept them at 0. But the problem is, if they keep swinging, you can't endlessly pass turn, and so the strategy didn't work. However, because of that testing, I did realize how powerful this card really is. I already ran it, obviously, because it's a staple in the deck, but you really start seeing some of the insane lines of play you can do with this card, so you want to run the 1-off. Now, in a deck that's prone to decking out, this card is pretty good. Now, back in the day, when we first ran it, this card was ass, because he's success 25, and he doesn't give any power up at first. So back in the day, getting to 25 without power up from him was borderline impossible. However, now with new triggers and the Excel circle, 25 is easy. You could literally put a slip Pangolin, like a fucking draw trigger, on your Excel circle and get 1 trigger, and boom, you're at success. So if you're very close to decking out, but you're not ready to win yet, if maybe all your Rhinos, Monoculus, or Leopard are gone in the drop zone for some reason, like maybe they went all into damage and then you started healing a bit, and now you're like, what the fuck? You can send them back with this boy. It'll be to bottom, but Mika Subaru and Leopard both shuffle, so that way you'll get them eventually again. So that's just why you run it. It's a 1-off. You really only use it in very rare fringe situations, but it's very useful in those situations. Then we run the GB8. Now, getting to this guy is pretty easy because we run the flip G-guard quite a bit. You'll see why later. He's basically a worse Bolero, but he doesn't cost a soul. So from time to time, you'll be like, damn, I want a Bolero, but I don't actually have soul. Guess I'll go into him, ditch your entire hand, but you're basically hoping to win at that point. He can choose 5 units. So back in the day, you would choose basically all your rear guards. Now, you can no longer do that, but you can choose your front row. Even if you have 2 Excel circles, you just give his power boost to the front row. Also, this act is basically like you ditch 2 cards, you give 10k to 5 units. It's not a once per turn, so you can keep doing this. So if you have a gigantic hand because of past turning, like your Nlk player tried to damage deny you, and you have like 12 cards in hand, you don't give 10k to the front, you give 60k to the front. And then once your hand is almost empty or empty, he himself gets another 40k and a crit. Now, usually that doesn't matter because they'll still PG it, but overall, it's just a worse Bolero that doesn't cost soul. Now, we run this boy once. Why? Again, this card only made it into the deck after 150 games, maybe 200 games, something insane. We needed a way to flip up a unit so that we're at GB2 without using Bolero. Because if we have 2 soul, we start the game at 2 soul when we're on 3 because Telescope Rabbit goes out. So we have 2 soul. If you were to draw into your Honolly too late, maybe of a draw trigger in your opponent's turn, maybe during your drive check, you have no way of getting that on board. And if you were to go into Bolero, like the turn before, you Soul Blast 1 out, now you have 1 soul left. If you see your Honolly too late, you have the 1 soul left because you went into Bolero. Now you will try to use Mirage, the G-Guard, which can cheat out a Honolly in your opponent's turn. So you do that, but now you're at 0 soul, meaning you are no longer able to do the Zoa combo because Monocular Tiger costs a soul. That is why this guy is in here. What you're gonna do is you're gonna stride into him, flip up a Bolero, and that way, even if you see a Honolly in your drive checks, you are still able to Almirage him out because you have your 2 soul left. 1 for the Almirage and 1 for the Monocular skill turn. So overall, you only stride this when things are going wrong, but he can save your ass when things are going wrong. Next up, 1 Leopard Chaser. This card would be the nut if he flipped, but he doesn't. However, many people probably forgot about this card, and I did too until I was scrolling through the wiki, just like with the yellow bolt in France. I was scrolling through the wiki, I was like, I have to be missing something, and boy, I did. Leopard Chaser, an old Fighters Collection card that's largely looked over because, well, he's ass. He only works when you play Leopard, and back in the day playing Leopard was a big fat joke. So what he does is, you swing with him, you choose a rear, that rear gets 4k power, at the end of the turn it dies, and you fetch a rear with the same name. Now usually this sounds pretty bad, because you could be going Bolero, which is much better, or our Flamey Boy and flip something. Now this card does something pretty amazing only because of the new Leopard. Because obviously when you're calling cards on your field and you're going to get a replacement, that's pretty bad. You could have just kept that card in hand. You're never getting a new card. Like you could call a Monocular Tiger, replace it, nothing changed. You just had that Monocular Tiger, could have kept it in hand, didn't fucking matter. There's no reason to do that when you could have gone Bolero. However, Leopard calls cards from the top of the deck. So because of this card, Leopard's calls aren't just calls anymore. They're also add to hands now. So what you do is, if your Leopard rides, you mill a normal unit, check top 4, and you find a Bikun or a heel, you call that shit. Because now, you will stride into Leopard Chaser, swing, choose the heel or the Bikun, and at the end of the turn, said heel or Bikun will die, and you will get to fetch it. So Leopard has become a draw 4. You get to scry 4 actually, and draw something. That is so nuts, because it looks for heals. So in those fringe situations where you're like, check 4, oh damn, it's a fucking heal. I don't want to call this because then I lost the heal out of my deck. Now you're actually adding a heal into your hand, and getting heals to hands is the way we win against Nlk. Same thing for the Bikun. Getting a Bikun to hand for free is essentially surviving 1 more counterblast worth of loop, because if you're Honolly, you're already stopping the rear guards, like at the later points, and that big ass Vanguard swing, you just got a free PG. But getting a heal is the really key part, but we'll get to that in a bit. Overall, amazing card. So fucking happy I found this on the wiki. Now I did see one topping list in Asia run this before, but that list had no way of beating Nlk. And he only topped because he didn't see Nlk, as I saw in the tournament report. So overall, congrats to him. You only go into this against Nlk to get the heal, because the rest of the deck works this way. So I don't know why he ran it, but he did. So I guess good on him. But so now, this card boy, I'm happy I found it. This card is really, really amazing. As a one-off, you know, there's no point in doing this more often than that. You need to go into it once when the situation occurs, and that's it. Next, we have our Zoa, our one-punch kill. I already explained to you how it works. You just Rhino, Monoculus. Overall, you can actually use this combo more easily than you may think. Many people think, oh, you need the one Leopard because you need an ultimate stride folder, the one Rhino, and the Monoculus. And that's pretty specific. And it's true. It's pretty easy to get to with all the draws, and something else I will show you pretty quickly soon. But let's say you're bricking beyond belief. Let's say all your Leopards are gone. Now what? Well, what you do is you ride Rhino and you ultimate stride with Rhino, and now the problem is solved. Hopefully you have a third Rhino, or you go double Monoculus. Or let's say there's no Rhinos, but you do have the Leopard and the Monoculus. You go ultimate stride with Leopard, go into Zoa, draw. Maybe you draw the Rhino, or again you go double Monoculus. Or another one, let's say you don't have Monoculus, but you do have two Leopard and a Rhino. What you will do is ride a Leopard, try to sack into a Monoculus, because you have basically two chances to check top 4, and so the likelihood of seeing a Monoculus when you haven't seen any in all your draws is actually pretty huge. Like, you haven't seen Monoculus in your draws and you're saving them if you had seen them. So it's not like you randomly lose them. So you haven't seen Monoculus in all your draws. They're in your deck. You're gonna hit them off your Leopard, then you ultimate stride Rhino, and the Monoculus is already there because of your Leopard on-ride skill. But so what if, again, you have to do it with just two Monoculus? So either you had to re-ride Rhino, ultimate stride Rhino, draw, and then call double Monoculus, or you didn't have Rhino, you went Leopard, ultimate stride with Leopard, double Monoculus. That's still nuts, because again, the chance of hitting a normal unit is twice as high as hitting a trigger unit. And since you're re-riding with Leopard, and since you have two of them, the likelihood that you hit double trigger is really, really low. And again, if you just hit the normal unit once, you're already blocking Sentinels. And after a loop, the majority of their hand will be Sentinels because of all those protect markers. Now, a very, very smart Nlk player will probably start putting away protect markers, knowing that this is coming up. But again, since this deck hasn't topped shit, because Great Nature is seen as a bad rogue deck, not even rogue, just seen as a bad joke of a deck by a large majority of the player base, most people won't have enough matches to really make very informed decisions on this whole deal. So they will be keeping some protect markers for some stupid fucking reason, and they will just die to this in 95% of the games, unless they have the Solemn and everything lines up perfectly so they have all the heals. So on Zoa, very key. Like, this deck couldn't beat Nlk without this. Do the way you survive, which is with all the Honolees, the Bikuns, the Draw PGs, and something you will see soon. Then you Zoa and you win. That's the win con against Nlk. Every other deck, like, you can destroy with the Crayons and the Rhinos, but the Nlk matchup, this card is too key. Now we get into G-Guards. So yeah, you didn't see many strides, right? We're running a shit ton of G-Guards. First of all, we run the one Kundalini. I said before, resources are an issue, and this card saves your resources. Sometimes what I will do is, if I had to turn down a counterblast because of Honolly or Telescope Rabbit, and I have one open damage, I will make it so I have a rear guard in my front row, because I want to bait them into attacking that. So they attack said rear guard, and then I G-Guard, which then gives me the opportunity to countercharge. Now I have 2 CB and I can randomly do my Zoa shit out of nowhere. So that's pretty funny for this card. And again, it's your only way to CC in this deck, so there's a really good reason to run it. Then we run one Mirage. This card is fun. This card is so fun. It's basically like Ange's Citron. It can call out rear guards in your opponent's turn. So you can call out a Bobo and randomly give yourself damage to Zoa them, or you can call out a Honolly in the middle of your opponent's attacks. Maybe they're going, maybe they're spikes and they're going for the GB8 and they're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna destroy them. Then you go Mirage, Honolly, get cucked. That's pretty funny. Also, if they're doing a big Agrias turn, it also hurts quite a bit. Against Ezels, let's say they don't have a lot of counterblast because you knew you could do this. They go for the Glorious Raining, you G-Guard into this, get to Honolly, boom, get cucked. They plant their whole turn on those multi-attacks, and out of nowhere, this cunt calls out a Honolly. And again, most players won't know because they haven't played against Great Nature because it's such a bad deck. Again, so a really, really awesome card that comes up in fringe situations. One Sinkalpa, a great card, especially with the introduction of Excel circles. He gives more power the more empty circles you have, but because of Excel circles, you have way more open circles. Apart from that, he will give power to a rear guard as well. And then If that rear guard goes over 20, you get to draw a card. You basically refund that heal discard cost met with maybe some other kind of card. You use this in normal matchups. You don't use this in Nlk matchups because you will be using the counterblast for something else. But in a regular matchup, you G-guard into this. It's a huge G-guard because of Excel circles and because you empty your own field with Bolero, and then you get a free draw. Then 1 Rillo. This card also got better because of Excel circles. He gets plus 10k when you have 3 open circles, which is much easier when you have 1 free circle already. Use him because he doesn't cost a counterblast. He's basically like a plot maker, but for this deck. Now next, the card we have all been waiting for. My favorite card in the deck. Spangled. 3 times. What this card does, and most people run 1 because first of all he creates deck out problems, and secondly he costs a counterblast and he doesn't seem all that useful to most people. What he does is you place him, counterblast 1, flip something in your G zone, and then every single guardian on your guardian circle gets a skill that says when this is retired from G, draw a card. So you guard with 1 card, and then with him after that you draw 1 card. You guard with 5 cards, and then with him, and with him again, and with him again, you draw 15 cards. Do you see where I'm going with this? What this card allows you to do is when your opponent sees, I'm gonna loop, he only has 7 cards in hand, no deck can survive that, but then 7 cards happen to turn into 12 or more. Let's say you had, I don't know, 7 cards, you know, and 3 were heals, 4 were some other shit, like your fucking worthless draws, you know. This is why you run draws, because you get more cards in hand. They swing, you throw your hand, and you go G-guard, G-guard, G-guard maybe a 3rd time. You draw almost your entire deck. And now, because we run these Bikuns, and our draw PGs as everyone does, we are bound to hit the Bikuns, the draw PGs, the everything. Purely because of this. That's how we survive. We drew into the Bikuns, we drew into the draw PGs, we drew maybe into heals that we now can no longer use as G-guard, but that's just big shield. And we have the Honoli, so they're only gonna come at us with a big Vanguard who gets cucked by Bikuns and draw PGs. That's how we win. That's basically why this deck humiliates Nlk, unless of course you brick. As I said, if you brick, okay, you don't win. That may happen. I'm actually really afraid of that. I could go to Worlds so prepared, winning all the time in my playtesting, and then I come up in round 1, 2, 3, whatever, and I brick and it ends, and that's fine. You know I did my best at that point. But in testing so far against some awesome players, this card cucks Nlk, because all the cards with which you cuck Nlk will come into your hand because of this. This is why you use the Leopal Chaser to get yourself an extra heal, because an extra heal easily turns into an entire new hand or even doubling your hand size. So what actually, usually you won't have 7 cards in your hand because of all those draws. Now you see why all those draws matter. Because you run 8 draws, you will usually have a hand of 10, and that's like pretty okay, cool. But when that hand of 10 turns into a hand of 28, then you win, because you will have enough to survive even the biggest loop. That's why I said you bait them into looping, because they won't know that this is coming. You will give them maybe too much damage. Like if you know, okay, I have the 2 heals, you give them the 3rd damage. Let them Bobo into the 4th. They will loop. They will give you all the damage. You will Spangled them out of the game. You will go double Spangled, double your hand size. You will have all the pieces to Zoa them next turn, and you will have enough cards to guard basically anything. Now, technically, you only need 2 for that. So why would you run the 3rd? This is where even more interesting stuff comes in. First I ran 2, but again, once you get into game number 201, you see, oh, this is an interesting situation, and I have room to do this. What may be happening is that you only have 1 heal in hand. So you do the thing, you will draw 8 new cards maybe, and then you have 2 more heals suddenly, and you go, hey, wait a second, I have this card face up and another one. So what you can then do is, now that you drew so many cards and you saw those 2 final heals, you can now still do the double Spangled and still double your hand size out of nowhere. So you run the 1 because you could sack into 2 more and then do the double. Of course, if you hadn't G-guarded before this, but you hadn't because you had the heals in hand and you're keeping them specifically for this. So that's why you run the Turd. Now, if you're in a really bad situation and you see, hey, I have 3 heals in hand, but the rest of my hand is fucking garbage. It's all those disgusting slip pangolins. No, they're not disgusting, they're actually really cute. But so, it's all those slip pangolins and stuff like that. You can literally triple Spangled and get a whole new hand and survive anything. So you could sometimes use 3 in a row, but that doesn't really come up. Especially if you had to use a counterblast already, because maybe you had to call the Honolly. Now, if you see the Honolly in your opening hand, you can call it before you have damage at all, meaning you don't have to do anything face down. But if you see the Honolly later, that's already 1 counterblast, so then you can only do 2 Spangleds from that point. Or if you needed to use a telescope rabbit, that's also 1 counterblast. Because again, we don't run any CC apart from the 1 G-guard, and we can't use the 1 G-guard because we're using the Spangled instead of that G-guard. So CB is a very, very tough resource because we also always want to have 2 open for our Zoa, but we're baiting them into looping, and well, they have to give us damage, they have to win at some point. But we're baiting them into looping, meaning we'll get the damage, then we'll flip it face down to get our 3 cards in hand, then we survive the loop and do the Zoa. So we really need to be running the 3. Of course, I'm also running 4 Excel markers, the pretty ones. This one will be the first because I know stream will probably love it if I happen to play on stream, and also the Aquaforce ones because I had those for my Aquaforce decks. Some honorable mentions for the deck. At first I also ran Mana Garmer, which is a great stride against geese. However, I noticed in all my playtesting I have not lost 1 geese match. None. Himiko, Angel Geese, OTT Geese, they just all got slaughtered. Now again, I could brick at Worlds, maybe I die to geese due to insane brickage, that happens. But overall in all the testing, and as I said, like 200, 300 insane amounts of games, I have not lost to geese. I just rush the shit out of them. I don't need counterblast because Bolero doesn't cost counterblast and turns even the most worthless draw triggers into massive beat sticks. And then they should still give me counterblast because I wipe my own field. So after all this pain I put them through of all my swings, I empty my field. Now they're forced to give me the counterblast because that's the only thing they can attack, my Vanguard. And if that doesn't kill them, I can still just Zoa them out of the game because once they're on geese, they can't G-guard. So like the geese matchup is almost free because of just the way this deck works. If you don't destroy them on Bolero, which you usually will, you will destroy them on Zoa automatically once you're given the damage. And they will have to give the damage or they get destroyed by Bolero because they could never swing because you don't have rear guards left to attack. So overall, geese is insanely free, meaning the Mana Garmer just didn't matter. Now I will say, one of my matches early on, I only won because I ran Mana Garmer. Because Mana Garmer together with Rhino can give an unguardable attack. And if you only have the 1 counterblast, the Mana Garmer comes in. So I will say, if I didn't ran Mana Garmer from the start, I would have 1 loss against geese. But I feel like the cards that I put into the deck to make this beat Nlk are worth more than a 1 fringe situation game against geese where I needed to Mana Garmer. Because in the 99 other games against geese, I didn't need it. And I think the 50 games where I needed other strides against Nlk make it worth it to no longer run the Mana Garmer. Now, if Nlk gets hit in some way by the ban list, Mana Garmer is in again, because then I can take out the Flamey Boy and maybe some other crap that I would have to retest and rethink about. With that being said, that was the deck profile. That is all for today. Hope you found this interesting. If you did, please subscribe to the Solemn Vanguard channel and click the bell button to stay up to date. Don't forget to pick up your beautiful Bolero playmat. If you see those details, the little Crayon Tiger, all the rainbow stuff, the little duckbills having fun at the bottom, the little painty paws. I love this mat so much. And yeah, that's basically all. And I will see you soon. Ciao.